The space race officially began in the midst of the Cold War. The two dominant powers of the world, the United States and the Soviet Union, were locked in an ideological and technological rivalry. Both nations sought to prove their superiority, not only through military might, but by pioneering the final frontier, space. The Soviet Union struck the first blow in this race on October 4, 1957, when they launched Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to orbit the Earth. The world was shocked. Sputnik's radio signals, which could be heard by anyone with a simple radio, served as a reminder of the Soviet Union's technological power. The United States, caught off guard, was forced into action. The success of Sputnik led to the creation of NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, in 1958. The stage was set for one of the most intense scientific competitions in history. Chapter 2: The First Man in Space, Yuri Gagarin. Narrator: Just 4 years later, on April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union achieved yet another milestone. Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet cosmonaut, became the first human to travel into space and orbit the Earth aboard Vostok 1. The flight lasted just 108 minutes, but it changed the course of history. Show images of Yuri Gagarin, Vostok 1, and the celebrations in the Soviet Union. Gagarin's achievement sent shockwaves across the world. For the Soviets, it was a moment of national pride. For the Americans, it was a wake-up call. Clip of President John F. Kennedy's famous speech, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy addressed the nation, declaring that the United States would land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of the decade. The space race had just reached new heights. Chapter 3: NASA's Response, Project Mercury and Gemini. Narrator: NASA's first manned space program, Project Mercury, aimed to send American astronauts into space. In 1962, astronaut John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth aboard Friendship 7. While the Soviets had been first, the Americans were closing the gap. Footage of John Glenn's mission, the spacecraft, and celebrations. But landing on the moon required more than just reaching orbit. NASA needed to develop the skills and technology necessary for long-duration spaceflight, spacewalking, and docking spacecraft. This gave birth to Project Gemini. Show clips of Gemini missions, astronauts conducting spacewalks. Through the Gemini missions, NASA learned how to perfect space travel. Astronauts conducted the first American spacewalks, and engineers developed techniques to rendezvous and dock spacecraft in orbit, all crucial steps toward the ultimate goal. Chapter 4: The Apollo Program and the Tragedy of Apollo 1. Narrator: The Apollo program was NASA's moonshot, its ambitious program designed to fulfill Kennedy's promise. However, the journey was not without tragedy. Show clips of Apollo 1 astronauts, their training, and the aftermath of the tragedy. On January 27, 1967, disaster struck during a pre-launch test for Apollo 1. A cabin fire broke out, claiming the lives of astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee. It was a devastating blow to NASA and the entire space program. Pause for reflection. But from this tragedy emerged a renewed determination. Engineers made crucial safety improvements, and NASA pressed on with the Apollo missions.